In a quiet little town surrounded by rolling hills and vast fields of crops, there lived a man named Ethan Carter. He was in his mid-30s, with sun-kissed skin from years spent working outdoors and hands calloused from gripping wrenches and tools all day. Ethan had inherited his father's mechanic shop, a small, weathered garage tucked at the edge of the town's main road. The sign above the door read, "Carter's Auto Repair," though it was more rust than paint these days. Ethan's life hadn't been easy. When he was younger, his father ran the garage with pride, teaching Ethan everything he knew about fixing cars. Together they fixed engines, patched up tires, and kept the townsfolk moving. But 5 years ago, tragedy struck when Ethan's father suffered a sudden heart attack. The loss left Ethan reeling, not just emotionally but financially too. Without his father's steady guidance, the business began to falter. Equipment broke down, customers dwindled, and bills piled up faster than Ethan could pay them off. To make matters worse, the world outside their tiny town seemed determined to leave behind old-fashioned garages like Ethan's. Modern cars came, equipped with computer systems and sensors that required expensive diagnostic machines, things Ethan couldn't afford. His once busy workshop now sat mostly empty, save for a few loyal customers who still trusted his work. Yet even those jobs barely covered the cost of parts, let alone the mounting debt he owed on the building itself. At home, things weren't much better. Ethan shared a modest house with his wife, Sarah, and their 2 young kids. To keep food on the table and lights on in the house, Sarah worked tirelessly, juggling shifts as a waitress during the day and cleaning offices at night. Despite her exhaustion, she never complained. Instead, she encouraged Ethan every step of the way, reminding him that tough times wouldn't last forever. Still, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on Ethan's shoulders. He often stayed awake late into the night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd made the right choice to hold onto the garage instead of selling it. One sweltering summer afternoon, as Ethan leaned over the hood of an old rusted pickup truck, sweat dripping down his face, the phone in the corner of the garage rang. It startled him out of his thoughts. Wiping his greasy hands on a rag, he picked up the receiver. On the other end of the line was a soft-spoken woman introducing herself as Mrs. Eleanor Hayes. Her voice carried a gentle warmth, though there was a hint of urgency in her tone. "Mr. Carter," she began, "I'm sorry to bother you, but I have a bit of a problem. My water tank, it's leaking, and without it my plants will die in this heat. Do you think you might be able to take a look?" Ethan hesitated. Water tanks weren't exactly his specialty. Most of his work involved cars, not plumbing or irrigation systems. But something in Mrs. Hayes' voice made him pause. She sounded genuinely worried, almost desperate. Besides, the garage wasn't exactly overflowing with customers. Maybe this job, however small, would bring in a little extra cash, and maybe, just maybe, it would remind him why he loved helping people fix things in the first place. "I'll come take a look," Ethan replied finally, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Just give me the address." Mrs. Hayes gave him directions to her property, which lay on the outskirts of town. As Ethan loaded his toolbox into the back of his van, he couldn't shake the feeling that this trip might be different somehow. Perhaps it was the kindness in her voice or the fact that she had called him specifically, trusting him to solve her problem. Whatever it was, Ethan decided to approach the task with care, determined to do whatever he could to help. The drive to Mrs. Hayes' farm took longer than expected. The road twisted and turned through open countryside until Ethan found himself pulling up to a rickety wooden gate. Beyond it stood a modest farmhouse, its white paint peeling and its porch sagging slightly under the weight of age. Standing near the gate was Mrs. Hayes herself, a frail-looking woman in her 70s wearing faded overalls and a wide-brimmed sun hat. Despite her weathered appearance, her eyes sparkled with kindness and her smile lit up her entire face. "Thank you so much for coming, Mr. Carter," she said warmly, shaking his hand. "I really appreciate it." "It's no trouble, ma'am," Ethan replied, returning her smile. "Let's see what we're dealing with." As Mrs. Hayes led him around the side of the house, Ethan noticed the land surrounding the property. At first glance, it appeared neglected. Dry patches of dirt dotted the landscape, and weeds sprouted between rows of struggling plants. Clearly, the leaking water tank had already taken its toll. Near the back of the house, they reached the source of the problem, a large metal tank perched on a concrete platform. Rust streaked its sides, and water trickled steadily from a crack, near the base, pooling on the parched ground below. "This is it," Mrs. Hayes said, gesturing toward the tank. "It's not much, but it keeps my garden alive. Without it—" She trailed off, her voice heavy with unspoken worry. Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. For someone living off the land, especially in such dry conditions, losing access to water could mean disaster. Though the repair wouldn't be easy, and certainly not glamorous, Ethan resolved to give it his best shot. Rolling up his sleeves, he set to work inspecting the damage. The crack was worse than he'd anticipated, and the tank itself looked ancient, likely decades old. Still, Ethan refused to give up. Using scraps of metal and sealant from his van, he patched the leak as best he could. Hours passed as he labored under the relentless sun, beads of sweat running down his forehead and soaking his shirt. But despite the heat and the challenge, Ethan felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in a long time. This wasn't just another broken-down car. It was someone's lifeline, and he was determined to restore it. Throughout the afternoon, Mrs. Hayes checked in periodically, bringing him cold water and chatting amiably. They talked about life in the town, the struggles of farming, and the importance of community. Though her words were simple, they carried a wisdom that resonated deeply with Ethan. By the time he finished the repair and tested the tank to ensure it held water, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard. "You've done wonderful work, Mr. Carter," Mrs. Hayes said gratefully, handing him a small envelope. "Here's something for your trouble." Ethan opened the envelope cautiously, expecting a modest payment. What he found inside surprised him, a sum far greater than he had anticipated. Embarrassed, he tried to protest, insisting it was too generous. But Mrs. Hayes simply shook her head, her expression firm yet kind. "Please take it," she said. "You've earned it, and consider it a thank you for restoring hope." Driving home that evening, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Mrs. Hayes and her humble gratitude. Little did he know, this encounter was only the beginning of a journey that would change his life forever. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a sense of quiet satisfaction. The job at Mrs. Hayes's farm had been challenging but rewarding in ways he hadn't expected. It wasn't just the money, though that was certainly appreciated, but the feeling of having made a difference. For the first time in months, Ethan felt a flicker of pride in his work. As he sipped his coffee and watched the sun rise through the kitchen window, Sarah noticed the subtle change in his demeanor. "You seem lighter today," she remarked, setting a plate of scrambled eggs on the table. "Did something happen yesterday?" Ethan hesitated for a moment before recounting the events of the day, the leaking water tank, the hard work under the blazing sun, and Mrs. Hayes's unexpected generosity. He even showed Sarah the envelope still sitting untouched on the counter. Her eyes widened when she saw the amount inside. "Wow," she said softly, shaking her head in disbelief. "That's more than we've earned from 3 car repairs, combined." "I know," Ethan replied, scratching the back of his neck. "It feels strange, like I didn't do enough to deserve it." Sarah smiled gently, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "Sometimes people see value in what you do even if you don't. Maybe this is a sign that things are starting to turn around." Her words stayed with Ethan throughout the day as he returned to the garage. Though the space was cluttered and worn, he found himself looking at it with fresh eyes. Perhaps Sarah was right. Perhaps this small act of kindness from Mrs. Hayes was the start of something bigger. Still, Ethan couldn't shake the nagging thought that there was something about Mrs. Hayes he didn't fully understand. She seemed too humble, too unassuming to live in such a remote area with only a modest garden to tend to. There was an air of mystery about her, a quiet confidence that hinted at untold stories. Over the next few days, life went on as usual, or as close to usual as it ever got for Ethan. Business at the garage remained slow, though he managed to scrape together enough income to cover the week's expenses. In quieter moments, his mind often drifted back to Mrs. Hayes and her farm. He wondered how her plants were faring now that the water tank was repaired. Were they thriving? Did she have any other issues that needed fixing? The questions lingered, in the back of his mind, unresolved. Then one evening, as Ethan drove home from running errands in town, he spotted several large trucks rumbling down the highway. They were loaded high with crates of blueberries, their vibrant colors peeking out from beneath protective tarps. Curiosity piqued, Ethan slowed his vehicle to read the logos painted on the sides of the trucks. One name caught his attention: Hayes Blueberry Farms. At first he thought it must be a coincidence. Surely there were other Hayes families in the region who owned farms. But the name stuck with him, gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. That night, unable to sleep, Ethan decided to dig a little deeper. Sitting at his laptop, he typed Hayes Blueberry Farms into the search bar. What he discovered left him stunned. Page after page of results confirmed what he had suspected deep down. Eleanor Hayes wasn't just some elderly woman struggling to keep a tiny garden alive. She was the owner of the largest blueberry farm in the entire region. Hundreds of acres of lush fields stretched across the countryside, producing tons of berries each season. The farm employed dozens of workers, supplied supermarkets nationwide, and brought in millions of dollars annually. And yet, despite her wealth and success, Mrs. Hayes had presented herself as nothing more than a humble farmer, living off the land. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. How could someone so rich appear so ordinary? Why hadn't she mentioned her vast estate when he visited her property? More importantly, why had she chosen him, a struggling mechanic with no prior experience repairing water tanks, to handle such a critical task? The realization hit him like a truck. Mrs. Hayes wasn't oblivious to his struggles. She had seen them clearly. By hiring him for the repair job, she hadn't merely been solving her own problem. She had been giving him a lifeline. The generous payment wasn't charity. It was an investment in his potential. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Her kind words, her insistence that he accept the envelope, her cryptic comment about restoring hope. She had known all along what she was doing, determined to express his gratitude, and maybe learn more about this remarkable woman. Ethan resolved to visit Mrs. Hayes again. Early the following Saturday morning, he packed a thermos of coffee and a box of pastries Sarah had baked the night before. Driving toward the outskirts of town, he rehearsed what he wanted to say. He didn't want to come across as suspicious or ungrateful, but he also needed answers. When he arrived at the farmhouse, Mrs. Hayes greeted him with the same warm smile as before. This time, however, the surrounding landscape looked different. Beyond the dry patches near the house, Ethan now noticed rows upon rows of thriving blueberry bushes stretching endlessly into the distance. Workers moved methodically between the plants, harvesting berries under the golden light of the rising sun. Trucks lined up along the dirt road, waiting to be loaded with crates destined for markets far and wide. The sheer scale of the operation took Ethan's breath away. "Well, Mr. Carter," Mrs. Hayes said, her eyes twinkling knowingly. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Ethan cleared his throat, suddenly feeling nervous. "I came to thank you," he began, holding up the box of pastries. "For the job last week and for, well, everything. You didn't have to pay me so generously, and I wanted to let you know how much it means to me." Mrs. Hayes chuckled softly, waving off his thanks as if it were nothing. "Nonsense. You did good work, and everyone deserves to be compensated fairly." "But that's not all, is it?" Ethan pressed gently, choosing his words carefully. "I did some research after our meeting. I know about your farm, about how big it really is." For a brief moment, Mrs. Hayes's expression shifted. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly replaced by a serene smile. "Ah, so you figured it out," she said, nodding slowly. "I wondered how long it would take." Ethan laughed, nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, it took me a while. I guess I'm not as quick as I thought, but I don't understand." "Why me?" "You could have hired anyone to fix that tank. Someone with more experience, better tools." Mrs. Hayes gestured for him to follow her onto the porch, where two rocking chairs sat overlooking the fields. Once they were seated, she turned to face him, her gaze steady and sincere. "Mr. Carter," she began. "When my late husband and I started this farm decades ago, we had nothing. Just a patch of barren land and a dream. We faced countless challenges, equipment breaking down, crops failing, loans we couldn't repay. But every time we stumbled, someone stepped in to help. A neighbor lent us tools, a friend shared seeds. Strangers offered advice. Those acts of kindness kept us going when we thought we couldn't." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Now that I'm in a position to give back, I try to do the same. When I called you, I saw a man working hard against the odds trying to provide for his family. I saw myself in you and I thought, maybe I can offer a little support the way others once did for me." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. He hadn't expected such honesty or such depth from this seemingly simple woman. She spoke with the authority of someone who had lived through hardship and triumph alike, emerging stronger and wiser. "For it? What you did for me?" Ethan trailed off, struggling to find the right words. "It wasn't just a job. It reminded me why I love helping people, why I started doing this work in the first place." Mrs. Hayes reached over and patted his hand. "Good. Hold on to that feeling, Mr. Carter, because the world needs more people like you." As they sat together watching the sun climb higher in the sky, Ethan realized he had gained more than just financial relief from his encounter with Mrs. Hayes. He had gained perspective, a renewed sense of purpose, and a reminder of the power of human connection. And though he didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of a partnership that would transform both their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. The days that followed Ethan's second visit to Mrs. Hayes's farm were filled with quiet reflection. He couldn't stop thinking about their conversation on the porch, the way she had spoken about kindness, resilience, and paying it forward. Her words echoed in his mind like a mantra, grounding him during moments of doubt or frustration. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a spark of hope, not just for himself but for the future of his garage and his family. Still, there was something nagging at him. Despite Mrs. Hayes's generosity and wisdom, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't fully repaid her kindness. Sure, he'd fixed the water tank, but compared to what she had done for him, it seemed insignificant. He wanted to do more, to prove himself worthy of her trust and faith. And so, as he worked on cars in the garage over the next week, an idea began to form in his mind. Ethan decided to make another trip to the farm, not to ask for anything, but to offer his help. Maybe there was something else he could do around the property, some other small task where his skills might come in handy. It wasn't much, but it was a start. With this plan in mind, he loaded up his toolbox once again and set out early one Saturday morning, determined to show Mrs. Hayes that her investment in him hadn't been misplaced. When he arrived, the farm was buzzing with activity. Workers moved briskly between rows of blueberry bushes, filling crates with ripe fruit while supervisors oversaw the operation. Trucks rumbled in and out of the driveway, their beds piled high with freshly harvested berries. The air carried the sweet scent of blueberries mingled with the earthy aroma of soil and grass. It was a scene of abundance and life, a stark contrast to the dry, struggling patch of land Ethan had seen just weeks earlier. Mrs. Hayes greeted him warmly when she spotted him walking toward the house. She was wearing the same worn overalls and sun hat combo as before, though today she also held a clipboard tucked under one arm. "Mr. Carter," she exclaimed, her face lighting up with surprise. "What brings you here?" "I thought I'd drop by and see if there's anything else I can help with," Ethan replied, gesturing to his toolbox. "I know the water tank is fixed, but maybe there's something else around here that needs attention." Mrs. Hayes tilted her head thoughtfully, studying him for a moment. Then she smiled, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Well, aren't you full of surprises? Most people wouldn't go out of their way like this." "It's the least I can do," Ethan said earnestly. "You've already done so much for me. I want to return the favor, even if it's just a little bit." Mrs. Hayes chuckled softly, shaking her head. "All right then, Mr. Carter. Let me show you around. There's always work to be done on a farm like this." Over the next hour, Mrs. Hayes gave Ethan a tour of the property, or at least as much of it as they could cover in that time. She explained how the farm operated, pointing out irrigation systems, storage sheds, and equipment used for planting and harvesting. As they walked, Ethan marveled at the sheer scale of the operation. Acres upon acres of blueberry bushes stretched as far as the eye could see, each row meticulously maintained and bursting with fruit. It was hard to believe that such a thriving enterprise existed so close to his sleepy little town. But what struck Ethan most wasn't just the size of the farm. It was the care and attention to detail that went into every aspect of its management. From the neatly organized supply sheds to the carefully calibrated irrigation pipes, everything was designed to maximize efficiency and productivity. Yet despite its modern infrastructure, the farm still retained a sense of warmth and humanity. Workers greeted Mrs. Hayes by name, sharing jokes and updates as they passed by. Even the rusted old tractor parked near the barn seemed to have a story behind it. As they approached one of the larger storage sheds, Mrs. Hayes paused and turned to Ethan. "You know, we rely heavily on machinery to keep this place running smoothly," she said. "Tractors, plows, harvesters, all sorts of equipment. But finding someone reliable to maintain them has been a challenge. Mechanics either charge too much or don't understand the unique demands of farming equipment." Ethan nodded thoughtfully, sensing where this was going. "Sounds like you need someone who knows their way around engines and isn't afraid to get their hands dirty." "Exactly," Mrs. Hayes replied, her smile widening. "And I think I've found just the person." For a moment, Ethan was speechless. Was she suggesting what he thought she was? Before he could respond, Mrs. Hayes continued, her tone warm, but firm. "Listen, Mr. Carter. I know your garage is struggling right now. I've seen the bills piling up, the stress weighing on you, but I also know talent when I see it. You've got skill, determination, and integrity, qualities that are hard to find these days." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "Here's my proposal. I'd like to hire you to service our farm's machinery regularly, not just repairs, but routine maintenance too. In return, I'll ensure steady income for your garage. Think of it as a partnership, a way to help both of us succeed." Ethan stared at her, his heart pounding. This was more than he had dared to hope for. A partnership with Hayes Blueberry Farms would mean consistent work, reliable cash flow, and a chance to rebuild his business from the ground up. But beyond the practical benefits, it was the trust Mrs. Hayes placed in him that truly overwhelmed him. She believed in him, in his abilities, his character, his potential. No one had shown him that kind of faith in a long time. I don't know what to say," Ethan stammered finally, his voice thick with emotion. "This is incredible, thank you." "There's no need to thank me," Mrs. Hayes said gently. "Just promise me one thing, that you'll keep doing what you're doing. Keep helping people, keep working hard, and never lose sight of why you started this journey in the first place." Ethan nodded vigorously, tears welling up in his eyes. "I promise. You won't regret this, Mrs. Hayes. I'll give it my all." Over the next few weeks, Ethan threw himself into his new role with renewed energy. He spent hours learning about the specific needs of farming equipment, consulting manuals, and seeking advice from experienced mechanics. Slowly but surely, he became familiar with the quirks and challenges of maintaining tractors, plows, and harvesters. Each repair job brought him closer to mastering his craft and proving to Mrs. Hayes that her faith in him was justified. Word of Ethan's partnership with Hayes Blueberry Farms spread quickly through the town. Farmers who had previously overlooked his garage now sought him out, impressed by his growing expertise and reputation. Within months, Carter's auto repair transformed from a struggling one-man operation into a bustling hub of activity. Ethan hired additional staff, upgraded his tools, and expanded his services to include agricultural machinery. For the first time in years, the sign above the garage door gleamed proudly, freshly painted and shining like new. Yet despite his success, Ethan never forgot where it had all begun. Every time he visited the farm, he made sure to check in with Mrs. Hayes, sharing updates on his progress and thanking her once again for giving him a second chance. Their friendship deepened over time, built on mutual respect and shared values. They often sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the fields, discussing everything from crop yields to life lessons. One evening, as they rocked back and forth in their chairs, Ethan turned to Mrs. Hayes with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "when I first came here to fix that water tank, I had no idea how much it would change my life. I thought I was helping you, but really you were helping me all along." Mrs. Hayes smiled knowingly, her gaze soft and steady. "That's how life works sometimes, Mr. Carter. When we reach out to help others, we often find ourselves being helped in return. Kindness has a way of coming full circle." Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He realized then that success wasn't just about money or recognition. It was about connection, community, and the ripple effects of compassion. And as he looked out over the endless rows of blueberry bushes bathed in golden light, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. As the partnership between Ethan and Mrs. Hayes grew stronger, so did the changes in Ethan's life. The steady income from maintaining Hayes Blueberry Farm's machinery allowed him to clear his debts, invest in new tools, and hire additional staff for his garage. For the first time in years, Carter's auto repair was thriving. Customers streamed in daily, farmers needing repairs on their tractors, local residents bringing in their cars, and even neighboring businesses seeking help with specialized equipment. Word of Ethan's skill and reliability spread far beyond the town, drawing clients from nearby counties. But it wasn't just the financial turnaround that transformed Ethan's life. It was the renewed sense of purpose he felt every day. Working alongside Mrs. Hayes had reminded him why he loved fixing things in the first place. The satisfaction of solving problems, the joy of seeing something broken come back to life, and the gratitude of people who depended on his work. With each passing week, Ethan found himself waking up earlier, working harder, and dreaming bigger than ever before. One crisp autumn morning, as Ethan stood in the garage wiping grease off his hands, Sarah walked in with a tray of coffee and muffins. She set it down on the counter and gave him a long look. "You're glowing," she said finally, her tone teasing but warm. "I haven't seen you this happy since, well, ever." Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "It's crazy, isn't it? A few months ago, I thought we were barely going to make it through winter. Now everything feels like it's falling into place." "It's more than luck," Sarah replied firmly. "You've earned this, Ethan. You've worked your tail off for it. And Mrs. Hayes saw that in you when no one else did." Her words stayed with him throughout the day, echoing in his mind as he tinkered with engines and greeted customers. He knew Sarah was right. It wasn't just chance or coincidence that had brought him here. Mrs. Hayes had recognized his potential when he himself had almost given up on it. Her belief in him had been the spark that reignited his passion for his craft. Later that afternoon, Ethan decided to pay another visit to the farm. It had become a habit of his to stop by whenever he could, whether to check on the machinery or simply to share a cup of tea with Mrs. Hayes. This time, however, he had a specific reason for visiting. Over the past few weeks, he'd noticed that some of the older farming equipment was showing signs of wear and tear. While they still functioned adequately, Ethan knew that preventive maintenance would save Mrs. Hayes significant trouble and expense down the road. When he arrived at the farmhouse, Mrs. Hayes greeted him with her usual warmth. She was sitting on the porch knitting a scarf while enjoying the cool breeze. Beside her sat a steaming pot of tea and 2 cups ready for company. "Mr. Carter," she exclaimed, setting aside her needles. "Right on time. I was just about to pour myself a cup." Ethan grinned, taking a seat beside her. "How do you always know when I'm coming?" Mrs. Hayes chuckled softly, pouring them both tea. "Call it intuition, or maybe I just keep hoping you'll drop by. Now tell me, what brings you out here today?" "Well," Ethan began, sipping his tea, "I wanted to talk to you about the machinery. Some of the older pieces are holding up well, but I think we should start planning ahead. If we replace certain parts now, before they break completely, it'll save us time and money later." Mrs. Hayes nodded thoughtfully, her expression serious. "That's wise thinking. Preventive measures are always better than scrambling after disaster strikes. What do you have in mind?" Over the next hour, Ethan outlined a detailed plan. He suggested replacing worn-out belts, upgrading outdated hydraulics, and reinforcing rust-prone components. He also proposed creating a regular maintenance schedule to ensure all equipment remained in top condition year-round. As he spoke, Mrs. Hayes listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. By the end of their discussion, she seemed genuinely impressed. "You've really put thought into this, haven't you?" she said, her eyes shining with approval. "I can see why my late husband always said good mechanics are worth their weight in gold." Ethan blushed slightly at the compliment, but pressed on. "There's one more thing I wanted to mention. I've been thinking about expanding my services beyond basic repairs, maybe offering training sessions for your workers on how to handle minor issues themselves. That way they won't have to wait for me every time something goes wrong." "That's an excellent idea," Mrs. Hayes replied enthusiastically. "Empowering the team will only make our operation stronger. Let's get started on this right away." With Mrs. Hayes's blessing, Ethan threw himself into implementing his plans. Over the following weeks, he worked tirelessly to overhaul the farm's equipment, often staying late into the evening to finish a task. His dedication didn't go unnoticed. Workers began approaching him with questions and requests, eager to learn from his expertise. In turn, Ethan took the time to teach them simple troubleshooting techniques, sharing tips and tricks he'd picked up over the years. As the farm's machinery became more reliable, productivity soared. Harvests were completed faster, deliveries ran smoother, and profits climbed higher. Mrs. Hayes couldn't have been happier with the results. More than once, she pulled Ethan aside to express her gratitude, not just for his technical skills, but for the positive impact he'd had on the entire operation. "You've done wonders for this place, Mr. Carter," she told him one afternoon, as they watched a truck loaded with blueberries drive off toward the highway. "Not just with the machines, but with the people, too. They trust you, respect you, and look up to you. That's rare." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, unused to such praise. "I just do what I can, Mrs. Hayes. None of this would be possible without your support, and none of it would be possible without your hard work," she countered gently. "Don't sell yourself short. You've created something truly remarkable here." Her words resonated deeply with Ethan, reinforcing the lessons he'd learned over the past months. Success wasn't just about individual achievements. It was about collaboration, mutual respect, and lifting others up along the way. Through his partnership with Mrs. Hayes, Ethan had discovered the true meaning of community, a network of people working together toward a common goal. As the seasons changed and the fields transitioned from vibrant green to golden brown, Ethan found himself reflecting on how much his life had transformed. The garage was thriving, his family was secure, and his friendship with Mrs. Hayes had blossomed into something extraordinary. Yet despite all the progress, Ethan knew there was still more work to be done, for the farm, for his business, and for himself. One evening, as he drove home under a star-filled sky, Ethan realized something important. Success wasn't a destination. It was a journey. Every challenge overcome, every relationship built, and every act of kindness shared was part of that journey. And thanks to Mrs. Hayes, he now understood that the greatest rewards came not from personal gain, but from making a difference in the lives of others. When he arrived home, Sarah greeted him with a hug, sensing the quiet contentment radiating from him. "Another good day?" she asked, smiling. "The best," Ethan replied, returning her embrace. "And I think it's only going to get better." Together they stepped inside, ready to face whatever the future held, with hope, determination, and the knowledge that kindness, no matter how small, could change the course of a life forever. As the months rolled on, Ethan's partnership with Mrs. Hayes continued to flourish, bringing unexpected opportunities and challenges that tested his resolve and strengthened his character. The farm became more than just a workplace for him. It became a second home, a place where he felt valued not only for his skills but also for who he was as a person. And while the success of Carter's auto repair had brought stability to his family, it was the bond he shared with Mrs. Hayes that truly enriched his life. One chilly spring morning, as Ethan drove toward the farm, he noticed something unusual. A thick plume of smoke rose in the distance, curling into the gray sky like an ominous warning. His heart sank as he realized it was coming from the direction of the storage sheds at Hayes Blueberry Farms. Accelerating instinctively, he gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When he arrived, the scene was chaos. Flames engulfed one of the larger sheds, devouring crates of freshly harvested blueberries and threatening to spread to nearby structures. Workers scrambled to contain the blaze using fire extinguishers and buckets of water, their faces streaked with soot and panic. Ethan jumped out of his truck without hesitation, grabbing a bucket and joining the effort. The heat was intense and the acrid smell of burning wood stung his nostrils, but he refused to back down. As the local fire department finally arrived and took control of the situation, Ethan spotted Mrs. Hayes standing a safe distance away, her hands trembling as she clutched her sun hat. Her face was pale, etched with worry, but her eyes remained steady, focused, even amid the destruction. When the flames were finally extinguished, leaving behind charred remains and soggy debris, Ethan approached her cautiously. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Mrs. Hayes nodded, though her voice wavered slightly. "I'm fine, it's just everything we worked so hard for is gone. All those berries, all that effort." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. He knew how much the farm meant to her, not just as a business but as a legacy built alongside her late husband. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with loss. Then, taking a deep breath, Ethan spoke firmly. "We'll rebuild, Mrs. Hayes, together." Over the next few days, Ethan threw himself into helping Mrs. Hayes recover from the disaster. He coordinated with insurance agents, organized cleanup efforts, and worked tirelessly to salvage whatever equipment hadn't been destroyed. But what surprised everyone, himself included, was how quickly the community rallied around them. Neighbors volunteered their time and resources, farmers donated surplus produce to offset losses, and even customers from Ethan's garage pitched in however they could. What could have been a devastating blow instead became a testament to the power of unity and resilience. During this time, Ethan and Mrs. Hayes grew closer than ever. They spent long hours discussing plans for rebuilding the damaged shed and improving safety measures to prevent future accidents. Ethan suggested installing modern fire suppression systems and upgrading electrical wiring throughout the property. Though these changes required significant investment, Mrs. Hayes trusted his judgment completely. "You've got a knack for problem-solving, Mr. Carter," she remarked one evening, as they pored over blueprints under the soft glow of a desk lamp. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Ethan smiled faintly, though humility tempered his pride. "You would have figured it out. You always do. I'm just glad I can help." Their collaboration extended beyond practical solutions. Inspired by the outpouring of support from the community, Mrs. Hayes proposed hosting a fundraising event, a blueberry festival, to celebrate the farm's recovery and thank everyone who had contributed. Ethan immediately embraced the idea, volunteering to take charge of logistics. With his organizational skills and growing network of contacts, he transformed the concept into a vibrant celebration that drew crowds from across the region. On the day of the festival, the farm buzzed with energy. Booths lined the pathways, offering homemade jams, pies, and fresh-picked blueberries. Live music filled the air. Children laughed as they played games, and volunteers guided visitors through tours of the fields. At the center of it all stood Ethan and Mrs. Hayes side by side, greeting guests and sharing stories about the farm's journey. Watching the joy on people's faces, Ethan felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just about repairing machinery or fixing problems anymore. It was about creating moments of connection and gratitude. The festival was a resounding success, raising enough funds to cover the costs of rebuilding and then some. More importantly, it strengthened the bond between Ethan and Mrs. Hayes, cementing their partnership in ways neither had anticipated. Over dinner that night, as they sat together on the porch watching the stars twinkle above the fields, Mrs. Hayes raised a glass of lemonade in a quiet toast. "To new beginnings," she said softly, her voice brimming with emotion. "To new beginnings," Ethan echoed, clinking his glass against hers. Yet even as life returned to normal, or rather, a new version of normal, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that their relationship had evolved into something deeper. Mrs. Hayes wasn't just a client or mentor anymore. She was family. She had seen him at his lowest point, believed in him when he doubted himself, and given him opportunities that changed the trajectory of his life. In return, Ethan had poured his heart into ensuring her farm thrived, proving that her faith in him was well placed. This mutual trust reached its peak one afternoon when Mrs. Hayes called Ethan into her office. The room was cozy yet professional, with shelves lined with books and framed photographs chronicling decades of memories. Sitting behind her desk, Mrs. Hayes gestured for Ethan to take a seat. Her expression was serious but kind, hinting at the gravity of what she was about to say. "Mr. Carter," she began, folding her hands neatly on the desk, "I need to ask you something important, something I've been thinking about for a while." "Now?" Ethan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "Of course, Mrs. Hayes, anything." She hesitated briefly, choosing her words carefully. "As you know, running this farm has been my life's work, but lately I've been feeling tired. Not physically necessarily, but mentally. I think it's time I started considering the future, not just for me, but for the farm itself." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding where this might be headed. "Are you saying you're ready to step back?" "In a way, yes," Mrs. Hayes admitted. "But stepping back doesn't mean letting go entirely. What I'm proposing is this. I want you to become a co-manager of Hayes Blueberry Farms, not just overseeing the machinery, but helping me make decisions, plan expansions, and guide the operation forward. You've earned this role, Mr. Carter. Your dedication, creativity, and leadership have shown me that you're exactly the person this farm needs." For a moment, Ethan was speechless. The weight of her offer settled over him like a warm blanket, comforting, yet overwhelming. Managing part of the largest blueberry farm in the region? It was a responsibility far greater than anything he'd imagined for himself. Yet deep down, he knew he was ready. He'd spent months immersing himself in every aspect of the business, learning its intricacies and earning the trust of those around him. If anyone could step into this role, it was him. I don't know what to say," Ethan finally managed, his voice thick with emotion. "This is such an honor. Thank you for trusting me." "There's no need to thank me," Mrs. Hayes replied warmly. "You've already proven yourself 10 times over. Now it's time to take the next step, to grow alongside this farm and make it even better than it is today." Over the following weeks, Ethan transitioned into his new role seamlessly. Working closely with Mrs. Hayes, he implemented innovative strategies to boost efficiency, explored sustainable farming practices, and expanded the farm's reach into new markets. Each decision was made with care and consideration, guided by the lessons he'd learned from Mrs. Hayes about perseverance, compassion, and integrity. Through it all, Ethan never lost sight of why he had started this journey in the first place: to provide for his family, to restore hope in his community, and to honor the kindness that had been shown to him. Every challenge he faced, every triumph he achieved, reminded him of the ripple effects of generosity, the way one act of kindness could transform countless lives. And as he stood on the porch one evening, gazing out at the endless rows of blueberry bushes bathed in golden sunlight, Ethan realized something profound. Success wasn't measured by wealth or titles. It was measured by the connections we forge, the impact we leave behind, and the love we share along the way. Thanks to Mrs. Hayes, he had discovered not only the strength within himself, but also the beauty of paying it forward. Years passed, and Ethan's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined when he first stepped onto Mrs. Hayes' farm to fix a leaking water tank. What had started as a simple act of kindness, a chance encounter between two people from different walks of life, had blossomed into a partnership that reshaped not only their lives but the entire community. The once struggling mechanic now stood as a pillar of strength and leadership, both at Carter's Auto Repair and Hayes Blueberry Farms. His journey was proof that even the smallest gestures of compassion could spark monumental change. By the time summer rolled around again, the farm was thriving like never before. Under Ethan's co-management, new irrigation systems ensured every blueberry bush received the perfect amount of water, while upgraded machinery streamlined planting and harvesting processes. Productivity soared, and profits reached record highs. Yet what truly set the operation apart wasn't its size or success. It was the spirit of collaboration and care that permeated every corner of the property. Workers felt valued, customers appreciated the quality of the produce, and visitors left with smiles on their faces after attending annual festivals and tours. Mrs. Hayes, now in her late 70s, took a step back from day-to-day operations, but remained deeply involved in decision-making. She often joined Ethan on morning walks through the fields, sharing stories about her late husband and the early days of the farm. These conversations became some of Ethan's most cherished moments. He admired her wisdom, resilience, and unwavering belief in the goodness of others. In many ways, she had become a second mother to him, a guiding light who had shown him the path forward when he felt lost. One sunny afternoon, as they strolled along a row of lush blueberry bushes heavy with ripe fruit, Mrs. Hayes paused and turned to Ethan. "You know," she said, her voice soft but steady, "I always knew this farm would outlast me, but I never imagined it would find someone like you to carry the torch." Ethan stopped in his tracks, touched by her words. "I wouldn't be here without you, Mrs. Hayes. You gave me a chance when no one else did. You saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself." She smiled warmly, patting his arm. "That's because you have a good heart, Mr. Carter, and a good heart is worth more than all the riches in the world." The bond between them had grown far beyond employer and employee. They were partners, friends, and confidants. Their shared vision for the future extended beyond the farm itself. Together, they launched initiatives to support struggling farmers in the region, offering training programs, equipment loans, and mentorship opportunities. Ethan poured his energy into these projects, driven by the same sense of purpose that had guided him since the beginning, helping others overcome adversity just as he had done. As the years went by, Ethan's family also flourished. Sarah continued working part-time as a waitress, though she dedicated much of her time to volunteering at local charities and schools. Their children grew up surrounded by love, stability, and the values of hard work and kindness. On weekends, the whole family visited the farm, where Ethan taught his kids how to identify ripe berries, operate tractors, and appreciate the beauty of nature. Watching them run barefoot through the fields, laughter ringing out across the landscape, filled Ethan with immense pride and gratitude. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came during the annual Blueberry Festival, held 5 years after the devastating fire that had tested their resolve. This year's event was bigger and brighter than ever, drawing thousands of attendees from near and far. Booths overflowed with homemade goods, live music echoed through the air, and the smell of freshly baked pies mingled with the sweet aroma of blueberries. At the center of it all stood Ethan and Mrs. Hayes, side by side, basking in the joy of a community united. During the closing ceremony, Mrs. Hayes took the stage to address the crowd. Her frail frame belied the strength in her voice as she spoke. "When I first started this farm decades ago, I never dreamed it would grow into what it is today. But none of this would have been possible without the incredible people standing here with me. The workers, the volunteers, the neighbors who've supported us through thick and thin." She paused, scanning the sea of faces before continuing. "And there's one person I want to thank especially. Someone who walked into my life when I least expected it and changed everything for the better." Turning to Ethan, she gestured for him to join her on stage. The audience erupted into applause as he made his way up, visibly embarrassed but deeply moved. "Mr. Carter isn't just my business partner," Mrs. Hayes continued, her eyes glistening with tears. "He's family. He reminded me that no matter how tough things get, there's always hope. That kindness can heal wounds and bring people together, and that dreams really do come true if you're willing to fight for them." Ethan stood beside her, overwhelmed by emotion. For so long he had struggled to believe in himself, to see the potential hidden beneath layers of doubt and fear. Now, looking out at the cheering crowd and feeling the warmth of Mrs. Hayes's hand in his, he realized how far he'd come. It wasn't just about fixing cars or repairing water tanks anymore. It was about building connections, fostering growth, and leaving a legacy rooted in love and gratitude. After the festival ended, Ethan returned home exhausted but exhilarated. As he sat on the porch with Sarah, sipping coffee and reflecting on the day's events, she leaned her head against his shoulder. "You've done amazing things, Ethan," she murmured. "Not just for the farm, but for everyone around you. I couldn't have done it alone," he replied honestly. "None of this would have happened without Mrs. Hayes, and without you." Sarah smiled, squeezing his hand. "Well, we're proud of you. All of us are." In the months that followed, Ethan began mentoring young mechanics in town, passing on the skills and lessons he'd learned over the years. Many of them came from difficult backgrounds, much like he had, and seeing their determination reignited his passion for teaching and giving back. Meanwhile, Mrs. Hayes announced plans to establish a scholarship fund for aspiring farmers and entrepreneurs, ensuring her legacy of generosity would endure long after she was gone. As autumn arrived, painting the countryside in shades of gold and crimson, Ethan found himself sitting on the farmhouse porch once again. This time, however, he was alone. Mrs. Hayes had passed away peacefully in her sleep, leaving behind a note that simply read, "Thank you for everything." Though her absence left a void in his heart, Ethan knew her spirit lived on. In the thriving farm, in the lives she had touched, and in the countless memories they had created together. On the day of her memorial service, hundreds gathered to celebrate her life. Friends, family, workers, and neighbors shared stories of her kindness, wisdom, and boundless generosity. Ethan delivered the final eulogy, his voice trembling but resolute. "Mrs. Hayes taught me that success isn't measured by wealth or fame," he said. "It's measured by the love we give, the people we help, and the impact we leave behind. She may be gone, but her legacy will live forever, in this farm, in our hearts, and in the countless lives she changed." In the years that followed, Ethan continued to honor her memory by expanding the farm's outreach efforts and nurturing the next generation of leaders. The fields of blueberries stretched endlessly under the open sky, a testament to the power of perseverance, partnership, and compassion. And whenever Ethan walked among those rows, he felt Mrs. Hayes's presence, a gentle reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples that lasted a lifetime. As he watched his children play among the bushes, their hands stained purple from picking berries, Ethan smiled. Life had brought him full circle, from despair to hope, from struggle to triumph, from isolation to belonging. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly hold challenges, he faced it with courage, knowing he was exactly where he was meant to be, surrounded by family, friends, and the enduring legacy of a woman who had believed in him when he needed it most.